Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Catherine Gallagher. This is CMG Talk. As per protocol and procedure, Spreaker does monitor these episodes and they do source to find out whether or not protocol and procedures and terms and conditions are being complied with. CMG Talk, Catherine Gallagher does comply with all of Spreaker's terms and conditions. There is no music played on this episode, and Catherine Gallagher, CMG Talk, is in full compliance with Spreaker's terms and conditions. Lately, there have been reports that there has been music on episodes and episodes have been taken down incorrectly. Spreaker is now fully investigating this and will be looking to find out where this is happening and why it's happening and where the reports are coming from. I've asked this to be fully investigated in all fairness. Now, celebrating successes, is there a need to do so? And how do we mark successes in our lives? Now, often when we find we have something that we've done that has been an achievement, or we have been working towards something and we've been working so hard to make sense of something, to achieve it. I wonder if it's something that you feel it's necessary to shout to the hilltops. Is it necessary, do you think, or feel, to mark it and celebrate it? And how do we acknowledge and celebrate our successes? Sometimes when I talk about this, and often when people come to me and they talk about what they do and how they achieve things in life, they often feel that it has to be big things. And it can be numerous things. It might be that they've always wanted to meet a partner and they've maybe met someone and it's something they've always wanted, or they've wanted to have a family. Or it might be that they've had a career opportunity they've always sought. It might be that they've always wanted to be able to follow through and be able to make amends on something. It might be expressing how they feel to somebody, that they've been really struggling to do so and they've been able to do that. It could be that there's an exam and they've been studying for it and they've sat that exam, or they've got the results. Whatever the success is, when it's something that we do for us or for people around us that improves the situation, or it's something that we've worked really hard for, and even if it's not necessarily what we expected, maybe it's exactly what we needed. And depending on our upbringing, depending on our environment, depending on the people around us, often depends on how vocal we are in celebrating our success. And there are certain things we do celebrate, often, not always, but there are certain things we do celebrate. Sometimes people say to me, birthdays are birthdays, they just come and go. Other people celebrate their birthdays, anniversaries, other people's birthdays, special dates. They acknowledge them as milestones. They might celebrate passing their driving test, right? They might celebrate getting into something. It might be a community. It might be getting into a service. It might be being able to be recognised. It might be being able to vote. There's lots of different things we'll necessarily see as a significant achievement, a milestone, or something to acknowledge and mark. And people do it in different ways. When I ask people, how do you acknowledge or celebrate it? They might say quietly. They might say within myself. They might say, I have a party, right? And I invite everybody and I make it all about me. And I'm in the middle and the centre. Everybody's different. And it depends on what it is. It depends on the circumstances. Is it something that you've come through, a health condition, and you ring the bell? We do different things to celebrate something we've come through, an achievement. It's been a real struggle or a challenge. We've worked hard. And as a psychological need, we need to feel a sense of validation, acknowledgement, which motivates us, can inspire other people. Somebody once was telling me that they had ran this huge race and they needed to celebrate it afterwards, because it was such an accomplishment. What kind of things in your life do you take the time to acknowledge? Think about it. Are they faith-based things? Is it bar mitzvah? First communions? Is it prayerful things? Community things? Festivals? What kind of things do you celebrate? Birthdays, anniversaries? That's often something that people talk to me about if they're overlooked. Some people say, oh, we don't celebrate those things, or we don't acknowledge. We don't need to. We don't need to. But often when we don't acknowledge these things and celebrate these things, the feelings that are attached to these moments or times or events or dates are about sharing a legacy, experiencing a journey, talking about shared memories, shared times, telling somebody and acknowledging to somebody, you were in this with me. And that's often why people will want to acknowledge, celebrate, take the time, whether it's sending a card or sending a text, or whether it's going out for a coffee or a lunch or a meal or a hug. Psychologically, when we take the time out to celebrate, it's saying, this matters. This is important. This is an accomplishment. I achieved this. I take time to acknowledge certain things. The day my organisation was born. Like, there's certain things we acknowledge. There's lots of things I acknowledge. Right? And I wonder what you acknowledge as a big accomplishment. I remember the date I decided what to call my organisation. And when there's certain things, whatever it is you're naming, right, or who you're naming, there are certain things you remember. You remember when somebody that you love dies, passes away, don't you? You remember anniversaries, happy ones or sad ones. You remember times that you have really achieved something. I remember the date that I passed my driving test. You do. I actually remember the date of it. And not because that it's on my driving licence. It's just because it's stuck in my brain, right? When you've worked hard to get something, we remember years that we passed qualifications and trainings. And we often will remember where we were when certain things happened, who was around us, significant dates and times. It's about our journey, our legacies in life, what it is that marks our life. It's what makes up our life. And when you stop and think about the passing of time and the time that you have in your life and the successes that you would mark along the way, have you ever sat and thought what you would put down in your story legacy? That's an interesting one. I do that within my result coaching with clients. What's your stories, your legacies within your life story right now? Significant things that you would mark as part of your journey. And what's waiting for you to still accomplish, achieve, or complete? And often when we talk to clients about these things, I'm getting an understanding of, are they striving or thriving? And what motivates them and drives them through? And do they actually celebrate their successes alone, with others? Do they feel it's important to do so? As a human condition, getting that acknowledgement of praise and understanding and appreciation and recognition, and understanding that we fall, we fail, we pick ourselves up, we grow and we learn and we overcome. That's what it's all about. And those of us who have had the hardest knocks know what it's like to have to pick ourselves up from the deepest places, right? People often look at people, and say, oh, it's okay for you. But we never really know how hard it's been for other people, unless they share. Unless they disclose or choose to disclose. Compassionate sharing. And often, when there's that kindredness of, you get this, you're not saying you know me that well, you're saying I've been along a similar journey. And we need people to be in our lives that can say to us, I've got you. When we're struggling, I've got you. And when we've got successes, they're saying, I celebrate with you. I'm proud of you. That's amazing. People that lift us up, and people that can raise us up, and people that will celebrate our successes with us. And people do it in different ways. Not everybody's going to be like, woo, right? Not everybody's going to be doing that. And sometimes we don't need that. Sometimes people show it in different ways. They might hug us. They might have a word they use. Cool, or that's fantastic, or brilliant, or I remember somebody saying that to me. I don't get much, but I have this look, and I know that look says it all, that they're really proud of me, and that's enough. But when we don't have that, when we don't have the success, when we don't share that, when we don't, recognise it, or we don't get it around us where people are maybe jealous or envious or put us down, or it's all right for you, how does that feel? That can often be quite detrimental to our well-being. It can often affect our confidence. We often then feel that we can't share things. We often don't want to tell people things because we feel that they're just going to take the success away, undermine what we've achieved, and we don't want to tell them. Because they're either going to go, oh, well, it's not really that great, or you're only as good as your next success. I remember being told that in sales. You don't get this award for how good you've been this year. You get the award for how good you're going to be. My response was, well, if that's supposed to motivate me to do more, it's got the opposite effect. Because we have to allow somebody to be able to celebrate. And yes, we might have to reset and say, right, okay, that was a really good achievement. And now I'm maybe set and ready to maybe have a bit more of a challenge now, because I can see where I am, because you don't want to necessarily plateau, although sometimes people do, right? But that's celebrating our success and not having it celebrated, or having people around us that don't elevate us, don't lift us, don't share their success with us. Or we constantly have somebody who just one-ups us. If you've listened to my previous episode on imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. That was a very interesting conversation that was sparked over many, many meetings. And it led to a lot of dialogue from people in business environments where people were discussing, very successful people were discussing all of the work, all of the innovation, and we talked about being innovators, creators, and people that take, but don't necessarily shape things, don't necessarily contribute, and what that's like and how it feels. It's important, I think it's important to be able to share, but it's also important to acknowledge where something comes from, I think. Well, I think it's important. I think that's something that we ought to do. So today, when I'm thinking about things to celebrate, it can be the small things. It doesn't have to be big things. It might be a goal that you've set to do with health and fitness, or getting proper sleep, or it might be spending a bit more quality time, or it might be getting, around to doing the chores faster, or decluttering those things you were supposed to be doing, or it might be travelling to that place you've always wanted to see. You've never quite managed it yet, but now you're closer to doing it because you've prioritised it. It might be focusing on clearing some debt and you're managing it, or you've just cleared it and you want to celebrate it by not necessarily splurging, because that then puts you into more debt. But sometimes it's about recognising the small wins, because these small wins adds up, and then it gives us that clarity and that motivation, and it allows us to then keep the momentum going. And people will say to me, so what does that then look like if I do that? How do I do that? I think it's about being mindful, being present, and not undermining and diminishing. Oh, it's not a big deal. Okay, so, and when somebody says to you, how did that go? Or how did you manage today? Did you manage to do that? 30 minutes or 40 minutes? Yes. Well done. And actually tell yourself, I've done really well. That was a big thing. And acknowledge it. Let that in. If somebody says to you, I'm really proud of you, don't go, oh, don't be daft. Say, thank you. I've learned through an experience, if you've ever heard me talk, right, I tell a story about why I learned how to take a thank you and accept that. And it was a hard experience. I had to take that on. Sometimes taking that thank you and that gratitude can be a hard thing to do. But it's really important, because if somebody takes the time to say thank you to you, What they're really saying is they see you, see what you've done, and they're acknowledging it. And if we then brush it off, what we're really doing is saying, oh, it doesn't matter what you say, it's not that important. We may not mean that, but that's often how it's interpreted. So often when somebody says, oh, I'm really proud of you, you've done really well, or, thanks. Being able to acknowledge that and say, that means a lot, or thanks for saying that. Not only are they giving you that thanks, you're also making them feel appreciated too. Walking in somebody's shoes, seeing that perspective and seeing how it feels for someone, and not dismissing and receiving a thank you, an appreciation, letting it in, is an invaluable and important thing to do. Celebrating the small wins. Helps us with our mental health. Releases the dopamine reward chemical and helps us to feel a purpose, goal setting, and gives us a sense of well-being when we do that. It releases those natural chemicals that make us feel good. It makes sense to take the time to celebrate our successes.